Welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guest, to do the same.
Each week, we will pick a topic to discuss, sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that's probably going to be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Mahlon.
And we're here for another episode of Roundtable Mindset. So, how have you been today?
Well, today's been fantastic. Where I live in August is one of the worst months to be there. We have a lot of humidity. We have a lot of heat. Today and tomorrow, high of like 70. No humidity. It's going to be perfect. So, we're spending a lot of time today and tomorrow outside. So today's been pretty good. How about you?
Yes. It is. It's a beautiful day. It's a little overcast and we're supposed to be getting some rain, but it has been beautiful. So I will take every second of it.
I know. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. So we're back with an episode, but we want to start with some food for thought. Mahlon, what do you have for us today?
Yes. So we've talked a lot about, growing, maturing, doing self-reflection, asking for other people's feedback. So today's food for thought is, we do all these things, and do we do all these things because that's what mature people are supposed to do? Or are we doing those things to actually hear what other people's feedback is? So my question and my challenge in today's food for thought is, when we ask for people's feedback, how prepared are we to actually do something with it? Are we just being kind and doing what we think is what's expected of us by asking others to provide their input and their feedback on situations? Or are we really taking and challenging ourselves to apply that feedback in ways in our lives that we can be better than when we were before we got it? So that's kind of my food for thought. I've been guilty of asking for feedback with no intention of ever applying it. And I've also been in the place where I've received feedback and I genuinely accepted it and started applying it. And it had a profound impact on me professionally. So I've sit in both chairs, and I wish I could say that I'm to that point now where every drop of feedback that we receive, I automatically take in and then apply, but that's not always the case. And so I just wanted to get your opinion on that to see, what are your thoughts? Do we think as a society, people ask for feedback, but they really don't plan on doing anything with it? Or do you think for the majority of the time, people or yourself take feedback and you really do something with it?
That's a really interesting question, just because I can think back to several years ago when I might have asked for feedback, but I didn't really want it. And I don't always know what to do with feedback. And so as I've grown in leadership, as I've grown in, just as a person, I think that I'm getting better at receiving feedback. I always do think, though, when I ask for feedback, it's because I want it. And when someone asks consent to give me feedback, I'm much easier to receive that too. Because I think when someone comes at me with feedback without any sort of like, hey, I have some thoughts I'd really like to share with you. Are you okay with that? If they just kind of come at me with feedback, it feels way more like an attack than it does like actually constructive feedback. I don't know why that is, other than the consent piece. But I think that is a younger version of myself always took feedback as hypercriticism. So it was hard for me to take that because I felt the need to defend it rather than just take it in and look at how I can approach things differently. So some of it is that trust. If I have trust for someone who is providing me feedback, it's easier for me to take that from that person too than it is somebody. I had this this one experience when I first started the job that I'm in now. One of the roles of my job was to attend meetings with parents and kind of help, not really mediate, but kind of help build understanding and cooperation in the team, between the team and the parent, in various different settings. And so I was at a meeting. I don't think I had even been there maybe 2 or 3 months. And I mean, this job takes a lot of learning and growing. So it's not like you just train for 2 weeks on the computer modules and you're ready to go. You know what I mean? It's a little bit different than that. But I was at this meeting and I remember I had visited with the parent before the meeting, and I went into the meeting, and the parent was really struggling with the team that they were working with. And I remember sitting there and hearing some of the things that she had been frustrated about and had told me about before the meeting. And I have a terrible poker face. For anybody who doesn't know me, you're laughing. I see that. But
well, because you're talking to a fellow poker face. I thought I had the best poker face, and my wife and children have told me we read you like a book.
Yes. Well, and for me, it's not just like my expressions, but literally when I get frustrated, when I get nervous, when I am sad, when I am whatever the feeling is, the only thing physically that I know I do every time is turn red.
My nostrils flare when I'm irritated or upset, and I never noticed that. And to find out that you flare your nostrils, I'm like, is there more of aggressive facial feature you can do to someone who's trying to talk to you to just flare your nostrils? I was mortified.
Well, and at least that's a physical thing that you can control. I can't control whether my cheeks turn red every time. Every time. So I'm sitting in this meeting, and the team starts talking about these things that this mom was really frustrated with. And I saw her starting to get upset. And so I started to get frustrated with her, and my face turned red. And apparently I just lose all physical control of my face when I'm just like, are you kidding me? Right. And so I'm like, the whole after the meeting, I was advocating. Unfortunately, it was a little adversarial in the advocating, because it was like, oh, she said this was going to happen, and here it's happening, So I'm driving home from this meeting, and the other professional that we worked with a lot, I still work with a lot, calls me, and she says, "Hey, Jamie, are you okay?" And I was like, yeah, why? Because by this time I'm tooting down the road, listening to my tunes, and I'm good, right? She was like, well, you just seemed really upset. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, your face was bright red, and you looked like you were ready to crawl across the table and grab someone's hair. And I was just like, I was so shooken by that. I was shooketh.
I was going to say, now we're doing a plot or a little scene from, I guess, Shakespeare. So continue.
I shooketh. I was so shaken by her observation, and I barely knew this person. This was the first time I had worked with her at all. And I was taken aback by the audacity of someone who doesn't know me from Adam to call me and be like, that was inappropriate. You know what I mean? And then my inability to take that feedback and be like, maybe I need to look at myself for a second. You know what I mean? I heard this a couple of different times in my early stages of the work that I do. I had a counselor at another school meeting, and he was like, we got out of the meeting, and he's like, hey, Jamie, you might want to work on your poker face a bit. And I'm just like, I walked away, and I'm like, what did I do? I didn't even know that I had done something or said something or any of it. So I do think that there's that element of trust that if you were to come to me and say, hey, Jamie, I want to share something with you, and this is something that I've noticed, that would feel a lot different than someone who doesn't know me well enough to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and feedback's kind of one of those things that I think we all strive to. Hey, we want to hear your feedback because we are big enough people and we're mature enough people that we can handle it and we can hear it with an ear that is able to apply it without taking all the emotion out of it. That's where, I think everybody that asks for feedback expects that. Until you get feedback that's something personally about you, or you perceive it to be personally about you, or it cuts a little too, too close for comfort. I've had that experience as well. So when, for me, growing in myself, personally and professionally, there's a couple different things I've had to recognize with feedback and asking for feedback and giving feedback. And you touched on one of them for me. I think when we go to somebody and say, hey, I think it was a couple episodes ago, I talked about having that honest conversation. That opens the doorway. And then it's a conversation. And it's not an ambush. It's not an attack. It's let's have this dialogue. Are you ready to have it? I would like to give you some feedback. And I'd also be open for you giving me some feedback. That's like utopia, I think. The other side of that equation is kind of what you just talked about, which is somebody gives you feedback and maybe you're not asking for it, you're not expecting it, and yet it just gets kind of flopped into your lap. For me, depending on what type of feedback they're giving, if it gets closer to me being a personal feedback, that's where I emotionally engage and I didn't ask you, don't bother me. The other one that I do want to bring up, and this is something I've had to learn as I've gone along, is feedback is a very wonderful tool, and it's something that can help you or help anybody kind of grow in their profession or, grow their skill sets, grow personally. But there's also times when you get feedback and you're not going to do anything with it because there's nothing for you to do. Sometimes people give you feedback and it's a change that you don't want to go down because it goes against your moral compass, or it goes against your personality, or it goes in a direction that you don't want to go down. I know that I was working on a team not too long ago where I was changing the landscape and I was getting feedback from people like, we need to stay the course. We need to make sure we're doing all these bad habits, what I call bad habits, because that's the team is more productive that way. If you start introducing this change, productivity is going to slip. Well, the big picture was we needed them to change and we were willing to cut down on productivity in order for the team to make these necessary changes. And so I've had to learn over the years that even when you get feedback, that doesn't mean that you are going to apply it. And that doesn't mean that you should apply every piece of feedback that you do get, which I think is, I was in the camp of I wasn't asking for feedback early on in my career. And then I got to the point where I was asking for everybody's feedback, and I was making the mistake as I was trying to apply everybody's feedback, because again, why would I ask for feedback if I wasn't going to do something with it? And now, again, a little bit more seasoned, I start recognizing the feedback that I need to be paying attention to, even if I ask for it, versus the feedback that's great. I'm glad you told me. I appreciate you. I focus on those situations. I focus more on the person giving me the feedback so they know I so much appreciate you doing that. So keep doing it for me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to apply every piece of feedback that I hear, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, I think the truth of the matter is that it is pretty cocky of ourselves to think that, it isn't worth a minute to just reflect on that and see if it is something that we need to apply. And, coming away from that situation, it really did shake my confidence a lot as far as who, I thought I was pretty well suited to this work. And then all of a sudden I have this person who's questioning that, or at least my ears heard, are you able to do this job? Right. And I know that wasn't their intention at all. Their intention was to provide that feedback so that I was aware of that and could make some adjustments moving forward so I could better do my job. It just didn't feel like that at the time. And so I think since that time, it's been easier to take feedback when I'm able to put myself in that other person's position and see the intent or the motivation behind it. That's helpful, which I think is why it's easier to take that feedback from someone that you know or someone that you have some trust in, because you know that their intention isn't poor, that they have a good intention in trying to help you out.
Oh, absolutely. And intent goes a long way. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I worked with individuals that were very eager to give me feedback during, performance review, mid-quarter reviews. And these were individuals that did not care for me. I would not trust them. And so the things they were saying to me, I would never in a million years apply. And there was a lot of times that just kind of rolled off me, because the validity of where this was coming from was in question because there was no trust there. And when there was no trust, I didn't even reflect on it when I probably should have, because I knew the source and I knew where we were at in our personal relationship and our work relationship. And there was no way on God's green earth I was going to try to implement any feedback these individuals were giving me. So intent goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. So we have another topic to bring about today, and kind of, I don't know, it kind of goes along with what we just talked about too. So today we're going to talk a little bit about bullying. This is a topic that we hear a lot about in our school systems, and how different child serving arenas deal with it and work through it. But today we want to take a little different approach and talk about adult bullying. So I know on our Facebook page, we asked a question about this.
Got some really good responses, by the way.
Yes, I went ahead and reposted it to my own page. I think I got 7 or 8 people to respond. I think all of them on my page said, yes, adult bullying is a thing. And I gather you might have a different opinion about that, Mahlon.
What would make you say that, Jamie?
Well,
I don't appreciate that feedback. I'm just kidding.
I reject that.
I don't know you well enough to accept that feedback. No.
No.
Before we get going, this is difficult, because I do have a different opinion, and I understand a lot of things go into bullying and talking about bullying. And when you look at kids being bullied and the effects that has on their, self-esteem and the individuals. So I do want to kind of separate that. I do think that kids are bullied. I think that's unfortunate. I do think there is, I think, to use your term, I think there's some strength-based things you can pull from those negative situations. So although I don't think bullying itself can ever be positive, I do think there are some positive actions or things that can come from those experiences, even if they are really negative. From an adult point of view, I just want everyone to kind of understand and hear me when I say I am still figuring what my what my opinion really is on this. I will say I've talked with some friends and some family, and from the beginning of those conversations, my mindset has shifted a little bit. So to say that this is fixed for me is not accurate. It's still kind of shifting, and I appreciate having these types of conversations, and I would appreciate hearing from our listeners too, to kind of continue weighing in and giving their opinion, because I think that is really powerful. But to get this kind of kicked off, I want to share with you and everyone else kind of where I started, and I've already started shifting, like I said. But when this topic came to mind and we were first talking about it, my knee-jerk reaction was, no, adults can't be bullied. Kids can be bullied, and kids can suffer through that. But I don't see how there is that correlation with adults being bullied. And I know you and I, Jamie, have had, a little bit of a conversation. Like I said, friends and family that I've talked to, we also have had conversation, and it was very interesting. So to kind of just, like I said, get the ball rolling, I started out with this saying, no, there's no way. And I want to touch on why I started thinking about that, because I'd love to get your opinion. And I also want to highlight what's starting to shift for me. So when I first heard this, kids are young. They don't know how to handle certain situations. As they get older, they learn how to navigate the social waters. They start learning about self-respect and what their value is, and what to accept and what not to accept. And I think it's during those times that's when kids can get bullied, because there's sometimes kids don't know what to do with that, and they're still figuring out who they are as a person, and they're still kind of finding their social circles. So there's a lot of influx, and unfortunately, amongst that, a lot of bullying can happen. So I was looking at it from that lens, and I was thinking, as an adult, we're equipped with having the coping mechanisms to understand that it's the insecurities of the person who's bullying you. That's kind of where some of this is rooted from. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the person that is trying to bully you. We can also remove ourselves from the situation a lot better than kids can. We are able to stick up for ourselves. We are, as adults, we're also able to confront individuals in a more productive manner. And so having those tools and those experiences as an adult, that's where initially I was in the camp of, no, I don't think adults can be bullied. And I'll kind of stop there for if you have any other comment or questions on that piece of it.
Well, I'm assuming you said that you have shifted, so I'm curious as to where that's going.
Probably not far enough, but I think I can recognize at this point, I think I can recognize there's possibility for adults to be bullied. I am not going to lie and say that it's really difficult for me to sit here and as an adult and say I completely understand how adults can be bullied. Well, I think one of the comments, or maybe even a couple of comments on that Facebook page, went the route of harassment. Now, harassment to me is, even kids could be, or not harassment and then, physical touch. Even kids can be victims of harassment and people laying their hands on them. To me, bullying, and I don't know if you have a definition or not, but I looked up a definition before we came, and basically, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, bullying is a way of intimidating another person by, putting them down, cutting them out of social circles, making them feel awkward. It's basically using words to hurt individuals and making them feel like they're not part of a group, or isolating them or putting them down personally. That's kind of the definition that I'm working with when I'm talking about bullying. Mm-hmm. Does that fall in line with what you're thinking?
I think that's a pretty fair definition. Another source that I had looked at kind of defined it as a repeated pattern. So something that was not a one-time occurrence. One time you might cut somebody out or dismiss them or isolate them, but it's not a repeated thing. So that seems to be an intent, that there's some intent in that is kind of the definition that I go by. I found it online on some anti-bullying website years ago. So.
Well, and that's where I still struggle from an adult's perspective, because, I think the majority of the answers and the things that I found too, number one thing was workplace bullying and bullying for adults and bullying happening in the workplace. And that was something that I struggle so much with because, and again, I'm looking at it from my perspective, which I can honestly say in my late teens, all through my adulthood, I have never been bullied. And I even, when I was talking with my friends and family, went so bold to say, I don't anticipate being bullied ever again in my life. And that was one thing that kind of, if you could imagine, the conversation really kind of picked up some steam there because, how can you prevent that? How can you say that? But for me, as an adult, these mechanisms and these things that we have that we've learned from and we've grown from, and we're able to compartmentalize what people are saying, and we're able to get ourselves out of situations. It's hard for me to understand why there would be bullying happening as an adult. Do I think that some people can harass you? Absolutely. Can I think that people can physically harm you? Yes. And those are all horrible things. But as far as bullying goes, I just don't see how strong that would be in adulthood. Have you experienced any kind of bullying as an adult, Jamie? I have not, like I stated. So it's kind of hard for me to understand where that would be in as an adult.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the thing that makes this difficult is that, I think oftentimes we look at our own actions through our own lens, right? So when I do something, when I say something, whatever, I don't always think about that as how it would be perceived by another person. And so in my experience, I don't know that it's often like targeting, which is a little bit different, I think. I have been in workplaces where it's isolating mostly. Like, okay, we have decided we don't like this person. We don't want to spend time with this person. So we're going to go out and get lunch, and we're not going to invite the group. We're just going to go, the two of us or the four of us or whatever. Or even spending time together outside of work, but only one or two people not invited to those sort of things. When they're repeated, and it's repeatedly the same people that are being left out, I think those are the examples that I think of the most. Because bullying is a little more covert, I think, than harassment. You know what I mean?
Oh, I absolutely do. And even in that situation, not that I'm trying to pick apart your example, because I appreciate you bringing that, I don't think I would look at that as a form of bullying. As an adult, there's sometimes our personalities, they just don't gel with other people. And I've had to work with some people, and I'm sure some people have said this about me too. I've had to work with Mahlon, and I don't really care for him or his personality, but we have a job to do and we work together. But outside of work, there are some other coworkers that let's go bowling, let's go out to lunch. And I wouldn't want that other person to come just because our personalities don't mix. And I wouldn't recognize that as bullying as so much as our personalities clash. And it's more of let you have a good lunch, let me have a good lunch, let's take a break from one another. And sometimes our strong personalities would get in the way, and we need that lunch break in order for us to finish working the rest of the day together. So, I can appreciate what you're saying, and I can hear that. But from my lens, I just don't know if I would quantify that as being a bullying event. And that's where it's hard for me.
I think the other piece to think about too, though, is that you may not think that it's bullying, but if it is affecting that person in a way that makes them less confident in their work, if it makes them feel like the work environment has become hostile, if there's some of those things that come about, then I feel like I feel like as a coworker, then it's our responsibility as a team to make a shift so that people on our team don't feel like they are not like they're not involved, or they're not welcome, or they're not included. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes we really have to think about how that person is perceiving what's happening, and almost honor that experience also, in order to help them have the confidence to then set the boundaries to say, okay, this isn't what I don't need to feel this way, or I don't need to accept this way. You know what I mean?
I do. And I agree with some of that, and I disagree with some of that. And the pieces that I'll start with.
Shocking.
I know. Jamie, get back up on your chair. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to have you fall out of it when I said that statement. But I'm going to go over the pieces that I agree with. What I agree with that statement is, if the intent is not, but yet, is not meant to be bullying, not meant to be offensive, but how that person is perceiving me, then 100% that person should be able to come to me and have that conversation, and we should be able to air it through. If they can't have those conversations with me, they should be able to go to somebody else. And again, this applies for professional, personal, it doesn't matter. If you need somebody to be the mediator between you and this individual, then find a mediator. I agree with all of that. Where I start not agreeing is, I can't be concerned how other people perceive my actions if they're not willing to tell me. And if I am not meaning to be offensive, if I am not meaning to be a bully, or, exclude people, but I'm just doing what I want to do, especially if they do not come and tell me the effects that is having on them, that is not my concern. I would have no way of even knowing. And I would say that would be 100% on the person who has that perception and who has those feelings in order to say something, because I can't live my life always wondering, am I impacting someone negatively or not? Especially if they're not saying anything. So that's where a piece of it I start kind of disagreeing is, I can't be so concerned with the unknowns of a relationship or the unknown feelings of somebody, where I'm going to make sure I walk a fine line, because that's an impossible ask. I have no way of knowing how other people are going to perceive my actions.
I don't disagree with that statement. However, I feel like there is a massive abyss between that is 100% on them, and I can't be concerned with how they're perceiving things if they're not going to come talk to me. And hey, maybe I can be a little more mindful of how I am perceived or how I am portraying myself, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there is a space for someone who's like, if you got a problem, come tell me about it. Otherwise, I'm doing me. You know, there's a gap here in between the two where we can look out for one another, and rather than just focus in so much on what it is that we're doing in our tasks, to look out for each other and make sure that I am above reproach when I am working with other people, to make sure that they know that I don't have to be your best friend, and I don't have to spend all kinds of time with you outside of work. We work together. I'm professional, and I can treat you with kindness and dignity. Where some of that bullying stuff starts coming in is when I'm in the workplace and most of the rest of the staff has gone and hung out over the weekend or something. And then they come back to the office and talk about all the great times. And that person says, somebody says, oh, well, what are you talking about? Oh, nothing you wouldn't understand. I mean, that is some intentional or some pretty obvious pieces that, like, you know, it's cool. Go hang out. I don't expect everybody that works together to be best friends and want to barbecue together on the weekends. But there's some air of, like, you know, have some discretion about that then. When everyone but 3 people were invited, that's going to cause some hurt feelings. You know what I mean?
Well, and again, it may. Would I constitute that as being a bully? Probably not. And I get some of this has to be with my definition. I get everybody's personality. Everybody's going to be different on this one. I'm not trying to say everybody who would look at that and say it's bullying is wrong. I'm just trying to give my 2 cents, which when I look at that, that would be unfortunate. I just don't think I would feel like I'm being bullied. So when I started going and continue looking at this, some of the things that I found that was very interesting. And again, I'm not going to bore you with like fact after fact after fact, but I started off with, I wanted to go and do a Google search just really quick. And I wanted to say, okay, is adult bullying a thing? And I had some statistics that they kind of pulled back, which I thought was really interesting. And one of which is, 31% of Americans that took this survey, and this survey came from the American Osteopathic Association, stated that, and this was back in 2022, I believe, 31% of Americans have been bullied as an adult. I think that number is extremely high. I would not expect, again, I wasn't expecting adult bullying to be a thing anyways, but even if it is, 31% of the people that took this believe that at some point, Americans have been bullied. I don't know. I just find that to be a really, really high number.
Did you read that study? Because I read that in an article that also stated that 31% of children will also report to being bullied, that it's the same number in children and adults.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Why would it be the same?
Well,
makes me think there might be something wrong with the study, because that seems weird, doesn't it?
No.
And are these the kids of the people, of the adults that think they were bullied? So I don't know. I don't want to pick it apart because I don't have it, but I'm like, that's kind of weird.
I think they're 2 different studies, to be quite honest. But if you think about it, if you've got a kid who was the playground bully, they grow up and nothing shifts for them or nothing changes. Or you've got the kid who was bullied on the playground who now becomes the bully. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So I'll bring my lived experience on this one. So I was a kid that was bullied. And I guess you could say at some point in time, as a justification, if I will, a way of me protecting myself or ensuring that I wasn't going to be bullied anymore. I stopped tolerating that behavior. I stopped accepting it. I started elevating myself. So again, people come to me with things. I'm going to elevate it to a space where I will top what you're saying and beat you to the point where you will just leave me alone. And this caused a lot of hurt and broken relationships. And it was a point in time in my life I'm not very proud of, but it was kind of that mechanism that kind of insulated me from, being bullied. And the bullying stopped. Again, that's all as a child, though, and as a young, I'd say middle schooler, not knowing how to deal with that more maturely and not really knowing how to navigate those waters. I felt like I was just reacting more than I was really kind of thinking through my actions. Doesn't justify them, but it's the truth. That's kind of what was happening. And I feel like as an adult, I am so much more equipped to handle situations like that. If I had a situation like I did back before and there was constant bullying going on, I think I would be able to recognize it and remove myself or stop the bullying from using other means and measures rather than just kind of living through that. Even at work, I think there's mechanisms for adults. We have human resources, we have management tiers that can get involved. I worked for a company that had a third party that you could call in if you felt like you were being retaliated against or if there was any kind of harassment going on. You could do a anonymous notification and it would then get picked up by a whole separate department in the company, and then it would start an internal investigation. So I feel like there's all these mechanisms that are in place to kind of help people. And again, I think most of those are around doing the wrong thing that could hurt the company, but also harassment. And I'll even throw in adult bullying. So with those mechanisms, I just find it really hard. There's no way that we would be able to stop that or to prevent it from happening. That's kind of where I'm at in my mindset. I do have a couple other things I wanted to bring up, but I'll stop there to see if there's anything that you have to say on that.
You and I have known each other a long, long time, and I hope you know that I know the person that you are. So with that, is it okay to give you some feedback?
No, I'm not ready to hear any feedback, Jamie.
All right, next topic. And that's today's episode of Roundtable Mindset. Thanks for listening. Click.
Of course, I'm willing to hear some feedback. So lay it on me.
Okay, so you were bullied. And then you decided not to take that anymore. And in some ways, to retaliate or to build that fortress up for yourself, you began to do some bullying. And I think that is, I think that might be playing in a bit to your perspective, is that you built up some pretty tough exterior to make sure that those things didn't hurt you anymore. And so to you at work, you're probably a little oblivious to it because you're pretty driven and, at work, I'm going to do my work and this is what I'm here for. And I'm not here for all of that. That's the drama that it doesn't permeate because I don't know that you, it's part of your aware, like it's not on your radar. You know what I mean? So not knowing it's there, not thinking it's there because you haven't seen it is super possible. But I also think, I can think back to a situation where in my own workplace, I was an outsider when I started, and then I got to be an insider. And when I was an insider, then I got to be part of that too. So I say that to you, and that was as an adult. I mean, I was a young adult, but I was still an adult. And I participated in some of that workplace bullying. I don't know that I recognized it at the time, and I don't know that my intent was to hurt. but it definitely did cause harm. And I was terribly bullied when I started. It was almost like the cool kids let me sit at the cool kid table, so then I acted like a cool kid, which when I started meant that they teased me and gave me a very difficult time in the job. So yeah, take that for what it's worth, I guess.
No, and I hear that, and I am not trying to say in by any means that your experience that you just shared with me is invalid, because I'm big enough to understand that my perspective isn't the only one. I'm just trying to share from my lens how I'm feeling. It's hard for me to recognize adult bullying can be going on. And, was I doing some bullying? Call it justification when I was younger. I never instigated anything. It was more of a reactive. And kids learned pretty quickly to leave me alone, because I would cut them quick and I would cut them deep, and I would make them leave me alone. I've shared one instance, I think in our last episode, that I'm not very proud of, where I just decimated a kid, and he was going through something very difficult in his life. And I used that, he was picking on me, and yes, it was a form of bullying, and it was repetitive, and it was daily, and I had enough. Where I took it was too ugly, but that was the intent. I wanted to make sure I elevated to a place where there is no coming back. And no matter what else this person would say to me, there was nothing else they could say that would hurt me as much as I had just hurt them. And so I wasn't seeking kids out and doing that. I was more responding to what they were trying to do for me. Again, call that justification or whatnot, but that was, to me, in my mind, that was the difference. So is that a form of bullying? It may be. I didn't recognize it at that time, as it was more of a preservation thing for me. I was just responding to kids. The other thing that I'm dealing with is, I think my home life had a lot to do with it. I come from very strong parents. My mom, who was not a super touchy-feely person, and I'm not saying that as a negative, a lot of times it was pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Don't wallow, like move forward. Don't just sit there and live life in the past. If things happen to you, get yourself up, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just move on. And so you have that kind of feeding into me as well. The other thing, and this is where I think the farthest my mind has shifted since all of this, is I think the way I'm looking at this is, do I think people bully in adults? I say yes. I think there are people who try to bully other people. I also think, are there adults who can't be bullied? And I'd say yes to that. So if I can try to make this as clear as possible, because I was trying to find a way in my mind how to convey that in speech form that's in my mind. And the best thing I can come up with is, if there is two people and one is actively trying to bully, that doesn't mean the person who they're trying to bully is being bullied. Because I feel like as an adult, there has to be some recognition, there has to be some awareness or some acceptance of that bullying. Because for me, I'm sure there's been people in my life who have tried to bully me, and I will not be bullied. I'm not going to be intimidated by people. I don't care if you go out to lunch without me. I don't care if you're trying to make me feel sad, hurt my feelings, whatever it is. At work, professionally, it doesn't matter. And part of that hardening is everything that we've talked about, me kind of growing up. But in a sense, I'm like, I would not call that being bullied, because I'm not allowing myself to be bullied. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think that those people have a resilience and have built some skills over time that shield them from that. I think I would probably count myself in that category, that I often think that if someone is trying to hurt me, that says more about them than it does me. And it usually is an indication of where they are in their growth phase. And, there's all kinds of things that can mean. So I don't let it hurt me, because I know that it's not usually about me, typically. But I guess at the same time, in my perspective, I feel like it's really important for us as people to be aware of those things that are happening around us, and help those that maybe don't have that ability or that skill set to say, this doesn't have to hurt me, help them get to a space of growth and support where they don't feel like it is hurtful. And I think so much of this stuff happens unknowingly. You know what I mean? Like, I think that in general, people are good people. And I don't think people typically wake up in the morning and think, who can I hurt today? Right? This is part of my rose-colored glasses viewpoint of the world, I guess. But to me, I want to be on the lookout for those that might feel that way and then do what I can to make it better for them in hopes that they can build their skill and say, wait a minute, maybe they were treating me that way not because it's about me. Maybe they were treating me that way because they're struggling with something or because something is happening for them that they don't know how to deal with or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I think there's some opportunity there for us when we recognize that at work, profession, or personally. When we see a group of people that go off to lunch and there's somebody kind of left behind, and I've done this myself, before, not all the time, but before, or sometimes, going to that person and asking that person out to lunch, trying to remove the sting of feeling like they're left out and saying, oh, well, now this is an opportunity for us to go out to lunch and get to know each other. That I think is important. And I think that's an important skill to see that, that if there's other people who may be feeling left out or feeling slighted a little bit, if as another human being come alongside and say, hey, if I can help diminish those feelings for you, I'm going to do that. And if I want to invest time in you, it'd be a great opportunity. 2 birds, 1 stone. I still just don't think that I would constitute that as bullying, though. And again, I think now we're to the point where it's just splitting hairs, and that's not what I want to do, because some people would look at that as bullying and some won't. And I don't think it's trying to be a right or wrong at this level. It's just more of, I think some people wouldn't recognize that as bullying because of the experiences they've had. And I would be one of those individuals that I wouldn't normally just go and say, oh, this person's being bullied now. I would say, oh, everyone else is going out to lunch. Hey, do you want to go grab lunch with me? And if they're busy, they're busy. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I'm landing with that.
Well, and I think that it's important. I think it's important to validate the experiences of other people. Like, you kind of started out today's episode with, I don't think it's possible. Like, how are adults being bullied? And I know you have grown through this space, but I think that's the important piece, is to always be able to say, I may not experience this and I may not see this, but I can validate if that is how you feel. I'm really sorry about that. And to be able to hear that person's experiences, gosh, I feel like we're repeating an episode we talked about a while back. But to be able to say, okay, I accept what you're saying, you're experiencing as truth and as your truth, and be able to support them in either seeking support for that or getting help for that, or doing what I can to lessen or ease that challenge that they're experiencing. So I was thinking about that actually as we were talking, like, what are some practical things, and some things to think about. When I was sharing the experience that I had, where when I started, I was being bullied, and by the time I left, I was participating. Some of that stuff looked really, really innocent and insidious. And the way I got wrapped in or roped in, and the way I roped others in eventually, was that, like, talking behind people's back and, talking crap about other people and not saying anything, not standing up and being like, hey, that's really not appropriate. Let's get back to what we're doing, or whatever. How often do we see this happening and we don't say anything because it's just part of the culture or part of our culture, that we could be stopping it where it's at? I like your idea of saying, hey, you see somebody who's been left out and just going and, offering to do lunch with them. That kind of stuff I think does help. So I would love to kind of talk through some practical ways to make sure that, if you do feel like you're being bullied, or you feel like there's bullying happening around you, what can you do different? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because I was just about to go there.
Oh,
Because one of the things that you said,
same brain.
Same brain. And one of the things that I want to touch on, which is, you know, we've said this in previous episodes, perception is reality. Well, one of the things that I think needs to be clarified is perception is reality, but it doesn't always mean it's the truth. And so to me, one of the things that I would want to do is if someone's perceiving me as being a bully or being some sort of intimidation or whatever we want to call it, I would encourage that person to have that dialogue, bring it to that person's attention. I can tell you I've been part of conversations where somebody had a completely different picture of me because they perceived an action that I did, or they heard a piece of my conversation with somebody else, and they just made this entire persona about me, and they carried it with them until it got to the point where it was friction between us, and we had to call it out, and we had to say, you know, there's something here that you don't like about me, or you don't appreciate. Did I do something to you? And it all kind of stemmed from this misunderstanding that took place weeks prior. And so for me, their perception of me is their reality, but it's not the truth. And so I want to just make sure, and I would encourage people, like, if you feel like you're being left out, call it to people's attention. You know, your example of people going off to lunch without you, it might be something as easy when they come back and say, hey, I don't know if you intentionally left me out, but I would love to go to lunch with you guys the next time. And at least at that point, you have cut it off. So if it happens again, now you know that you're being targeted. Now that you know, hey, they're actively trying to make me feel one way or the other. And again, if someone like me, I still wouldn't care. But then it allows you to have those other mechanisms that you can, and I know we're focusing a lot at work, but again, this can happen anywhere. I've been part of a sports group where, we had to come into it and the other parents were well established and we were the new ones. And there was a lot of cliques and there was a lot of inside jokes and there was a lot of, hey, we're going out to lunch. Oh, we forgot to invite the new parents. Oh, sorry about that. We'll get you next time. And there was some of those feelings, and I could either have made that something into what it, something more than what it was, or I could have just accepted that I am coming into an established relationship, and I just need to make sure that they understand that, hey, I don't think you're doing this on purpose, but we would love to be part of this group. I know we're new, and we're going to be committed to this team, just like you've had history that we don't have, but we still like to get to know everybody and still like to be part of the group. I think having those conversations and having, calling the elephant in the room and just calling it out there is a really good way of starting to change, behaviors, or bringing to light behaviors that aren't even intended to be cruel or isolating or even in the realm of bullying, but then can give them the opportunity to correct the behavior they may not even know they're doing.
Well, and I would encourage a more of a spirit of shared responsibility. In that if you've got someone who really is feeling in that space, we know what the effects of bullying are. We know that it can lead to a lack of confidence and depression and all kinds of things. And so, I feel like, yes, absolutely. If you have the ability to say, hey, I think I might be perceiving this wrong. Can we talk about it? That's really great. But I think that people who are experiencing or have experienced for a period of time that kind of hostile work environment, it might be really difficult to have that conversation. So I think that's why I'm just saying let's look at this from a shared responsibility approach, that I need to do everything I can in my workplace to make sure that everyone feels valued and part of the team, and that we're lifting up their unique talents that they bring. And also, if you're feeling bullied, speak up, say something so that you can get some support and help, and maybe have a better understanding about what's happening if it's not actually intended to cause harm.
Well, and I think there's a layer here too that we need to at least mention, if not spend a little time with, which is there are some people, and again, there are just some people that are horrible in nature, or they are self-centered, or whatever we want to call them, and from a personal lens. And we also have some people that are from a professional lens that aren't able to do their job, or they are, being lazy and the workload's not being spread out evenly. And so there's some resentment building up. Like, I think we do need to take a moment to say some of these individuals that are experiencing that might be experiencing for reasons beyond what they're aware that they're doing. So they're thinking it's not warranted and it's unjustified, when in reality, if you really want to pull back the covers, it might be because they are horribly nasty to other people, and now those people don't want anything to do with them. Or at work, they're not really as fantastic as they think they are, and they're really knocking out of the ballpark, and really they're not. They're causing other people to have to do more work because they're not able to do their job. And so if those individuals that are doing that are starting to perceive other people as bullying them, I could see where that's going to be, I'll call a false positive, where those individuals are going to say, hey, I'm being bullied at work, or I'm being bullied in my personal life. And in reality, it's a reaction to what they're doing and a reaction to their behavior. So I do think we need to call that out and at least mention it, because I do think that exists as well. And part of that perception would have to be the person who is perceiving themselves to be the one being bullied. There may be some self-reflection that needs to take place to say, hey, this is a cause and effect situation. You're experiencing this by other people because of the things that you're putting out, and there needs to be an awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's such a great place for shared responsibility, where those people around them can say, okay, look, here's the deal. This is what we're needing and this is what we're getting, and to have that open dialogue. But I think it's reasonable to say that not everyone is in a space to have those conversations. Not everyone is in a space to say, gosh, I feel like nobody wants to talk to me. Well, it could be because, you know what I mean? Like, those conversations don't always happen real naturally. And I'm literally just getting to a space in my life where I feel like I'm even close to being mature enough to navigate some of that stuff. You know what I mean? So, I think that there's a high probability and likelihood that you're going to run into people who are not prepared for that sort of, that level of adulting.
Right. And again, I think that would be colored then. The term bullying, I think, would be used when it's not really bullying. And I think it's more of a immaturity issue, or they're not ready to have that conversation. So I'm just putting it out there, because I know there's some people that probably feel like they're being bullied, and really what's happening is you're having a whole group of people frustrated with you because of, again, your actions in a personal setting or your inability to do your job in a work setting. So just trying to give some space for that too, so we can say, I think that scenario is very valid, and I think people live that every day. So, and again, maybe that's a big part of some of these people that are taking, some of these adults that are taking these surveys that are feeling like, hey, I've been bullied. I wonder if you really got underneath the covers and you had the honest conversation. Some of those might be genuine, but I'd also have to believe some of those would be the result of what we're talking about now. I have one more thing I wanted to bring up, and I know we're getting kind of close to the end, so I want to be quick, but, and I'm going to preface this one time by saying I don't think bullying is a positive situation. I don't think kids that are in being bullied, that is a positive thing for them to stay in. I think it's very toxic. It's very hurtful. It has damaging effects. So my next statement here, my next question for you, I just wanted there to be some context. You've said some things about strength-based. You look at situations from a strength-based approach. I also believe in looking at the positive side of life and trying to, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, that kind of mentality. And so when I looked back on my bullying, there was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of self-doubt. I also, changed. I removed myself from the situation, or at least had my parents do it. I went to a completely different school. It was a private school. So there was a big effect on me from being bullied. And I think if I would have just left it there, I think it would have just been a negative time in my life. What I also wanted to do, though, is I wanted to learn from that. And I think even as a young kid, as I was removed from the situation and I was in that private school, it gave me an opportunity to kind of understand what was happening and what I would start tolerating and what I wouldn't tolerate. And again, at this time, I was leaving fourth grade, going into fifth grade. So those are some of those years that start becoming part of your personality as you get into junior high, high school, and sometimes even into your adulthood. So it was really at a pivotal time when all of this was kind of coming together. But I will say, I took some positives out of there. I took some positive notes on things that I'm going to change about my behavior, things that I'm going to change about my personality, things that I learned that I will accept and I won't accept any longer. And it also helped me understand how to navigate some of those difficult situations. Again, we're talking elementary, right? We're talking junior high. So I'm not talking as a 40-something-year-old man. I had the same knowledge as I did back then, but I had enough of an experience and enough of a mindset to say, this is not what I'm going to do anymore. I don't want this. How do I prevent this from happening again? And so if I had to take negative and turn it into some sort of a positive, it did start giving me the seeds of that confidence and those abilities to start having those direct conversations with individuals. And although when I got back to school, I did it the wrong way by, hurting people with my words more than they could hurt me, really what the bedrock of that, or the foundation of that, was I am not going to tolerate your behavior, and I'm going to end the behavior because I am worth more than you saying these hurtful things to me and you making me feel like I'm garbage. I just did it the wrong way. But again, it's a learning approach. So my question, that's very long-winded. So my question is, do you think some positive can come out of the negative situations of bullying of kids, and I'll even throw in adults?
I think part of the reason that you and I were such great friends from the very beginning is because we both kind of experienced that. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I was bullied as a kid. By the time I got to high school and then as a young adult, it became this almost a persona, like, I'm too tough for this. Your words can't hurt me. Back off, that kind of thing. But it didn't keep me from getting hurt by those things. So do I think that some good can come from bullying? In a short answer, no. Just because you can rebuild something that was destroyed doesn't mean that we should have to rebuild something that was destroyed. And so in a world where we are watching our schools be entered by people with firearms on a regular basis, and that all started, the first one that I remembered was a couple of kids that were bullied. You know what I mean? I cannot ever say that good things come from bullying. I think that we get played hands of cards, and we get to take other experiences and other tools and build it into a good hand if we're able to. But I don't think that good things. I don't think that naturally good things come from something that's so harmful.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I don't want this to be perceived as I'm saying bullying is positive. Bullying is negative. It's horrible. It does nothing but destruct. It's a destructive force. People's personalities, tears them down personally, physically. It's not a good thing. I guess what I'm saying is, if I had to look at the silver lining, if I had to look at the life gave me lemons, I'm now making lemonade, or the strength-based approach, which would be from that horrible experience, I am able to build skills and techniques that will help me further on in my life. So although the bullying experience itself is not positive, I'm not going to just fixate on the negative, although it's there and I'm dealing with it. I'm also going to recognize I was able to provide and build different skill sets and techniques that help me in my life. And I've spent since that point, I've spent a lot of time refining them, modifying them, adding to them. So it wasn't like I got a complete set of this is how I'm going to navigate the world and my relationships are now fixed. But again, trying to pull some positive out of there, which to me, it was very hard to do. But if I had to put a finger on it, it was It gave me those skill sets. It gave me the technique. It gave me the ability to start looking at those situations a little bit differently and managing them a little bit different and not have the same outcome. And that was very beneficial to me. So yes,
Yeah.
I agree with you. The act of bullying is not positive, never will be. But I think there, from the pain and from the anguish and from that dark place, there can be some positive things that come out of that.
Well, and I think that it's really important, though, to think about how we frame that message, especially with our children, because I could easily say, like, I could easily sit back and be like, you know, I know this is hard and this is not okay and it's terrible, but you will be a stronger person because of what you're experiencing. You know, to even make that okay in any frame or sense is really a dangerous place to be with our kids. And so, although I hear the spirit of what you're saying, and I don't disagree with that at all, that I think we do have the ability to take those negative experiences and reframe it for ourselves and gather something from it rather than just letting it take something from us. I think it's really important to think about how we brand that messaging with our kids and with people who are in a space where they're in the middle of it, or they're highly likely to be a victim of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would never encourage my own children or anybody else to say, "Oh, you're in the middle of that. Well, buck up, because look at all the great things that are going to come from it." I think what the message is that is terrible. That is horrible. You know, you come alongside and you support, and, you know, for kids, you kind of comfort them and you kind of like reassure them that what they're hearing is not real. But I think you also have to let them know that, hey, you're not going to say you're going to get positive out there, but I've shared my experience with my kids, and I've told them I've decided that I was going to look for whatever positive I could come from that. Mm-hmm. But that might not be what they do. You know, each of my kids have experienced some sort of form of bullying, and not one time have I ever gone to them and said, "Okay, great. Now I need you to pull the positive out of that." What I have said is, "That is horrible. Let me share, you know, I can relate. Here's my experience." And I said, "You know what was really fun for me, though, is I went through and I was kind of like, you know, I'm a positive person by nature. What can I do? Can I pull anything that's out of this horrible situation that can help me in the future?" And that's kind of what I've done with my kids, is saying, you know, is there anything from this experience that you can look at that maybe can help you in the future? Or is there any part of it that you can learn something from? You know, maybe look at that situation that way. But that's probably as close as I've ever gone, because I do think you can't romanticize what's happening to these individuals, because sometimes they can't get away from it, especially now with all the technology that they have. I mean, they're constantly being bombarded. There is no reprieve from it. And I don't think it's fair to go to someone and say, "Okay, now you have to find the positive." I think sharing your own experiences and supporting them and saying, "Okay, but there may be something that you can glean from all of this," is completely different.
Well, and I guess I would, just to close out, one of the things that I was thinking about, and what encouraged me so much a few years back, is you know, it's like, not only can you help by not being a bully, but you can also help by being an anti-bully, right? Like, I remember my kids had this whole thing one year where it was like, "You can sit with me," was kind of the theme of it. And the idea is to make sure that kids that you saw were isolated didn't have to feel isolated. And, you know, if we did more of that as adults, if we were able to support each other better and just like look out for one another better, I think that would go a long way too to making sure that that we're not putting ourselves in positions where, you know, we have coworkers that are feeling like they're being bullied, or that there's, you know, it's a hostile work environment.
Yeah, I think I think that's probably a good place to end on this. And I will say, for me, I'm still going to dig into this. I'm still going to have some conversation. So you and I will probably be talking about this again. Because I think it's really neat to hear other people's perspective. And I know there's other people and adults and kids especially, but adults too, that are saying, yes, I've been bullied, or I've seen bullying happening as an adult. The statistics that I read, I mean, obviously other adult Americans are thinking that they are being bullied. So I'm not here to say, I'm right and everybody in the world is wrong. I'm just trying to give a perspective of, it's hard for me because of everything that we've gone through. But it is a work in progress for me. So I'm gonna leave it there to say I'm continuously challenging myself and looking at this and trying to find other situations in which I can look at it to say, can I see it in a way that it would be considered adult bullying? And quite frankly, maybe I'll get to a space where who cares what we call it? The fact of the matter is, it's a destructive behavior that's there. Maybe the name itself doesn't even matter. Maybe it's just the fact that as an adult, we're still doing to each other what kids do on the playground, which is trying to make somebody else feel less important and smaller than you because you have your own insecurities. And at the end of the day, if we call that bullying, great, or we call that workplace harassment or harassment, who cares? It's really about the actions that are taking place. And so maybe I'll get to that point. I don't know, but I'm just saying I'm a work in progress, and I'm going to keep on drilling on this.
Well, on that note, we would like to just take a moment to thank you all for listening to Roundtable Man Mindset today. It's been a good conversation, Mahlon, and I've appreciated looking through some of this with you. So
it's a topic that I wasn't expecting to be as invested as I was, to be honest. When I first started talking about this or thinking about it, I was like, okay, this will be pretty straightforward. And like I said, I started off with having a very strong, very firm, this is how it is. And through,
like you do.
Yeah, and through everything that we've talked about, it's starting to change. It's starting to soften. So I think that's good. And I think that's what these types of conversations are supposed to do.
Growth is good.
Okay. Jamie has her pom-poms up, everyone. Hey,
yes,
growth is good.
Yes. All right. Well, we will see you all next time on Roundtable Mindset. Thanks again for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Mahlon. Music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Text or call us at 402-819-8999. Or join the conversation on Facebook at Roundtable Mindset Podcast.
And never miss a new episode by making sure you like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being our guest today. See you next time at the Roundtable. And remember, your opinions and perspectives matter and are appreciated, but might not always be shared by others, and that's okay.